Hi, class. Today I'm covering Chapter 10, Writing for Traditional Print News Products. So in print news writing, we're looking at creating short paragraphs of easy to read information that's usually about 1 to 3 sentences. It helps to break down the main ideas in your story. It offers a little longer pause than a comma or a period might, and to emphasize those main points. Now, whenever you're writing for print news, of course, you want to maintain objectivity and you want to rely on your sources to provide those facts with an opinion. So, for example, if you said San Francisco is a city in California, well, if you know that San Francisco is a city in California, that is a well-known fact. However, if you said San Francisco is the best city in California, that would be an opinion, and you would want to include a source with that information. And whenever you are conducting an interview and you want to include direct or indirect quotes of information, direct quotes are going to be word for word. The only things you may remove are probably an or an in the middle of it. But in general, your direct quotes want to be valuable and interesting information, or if they contain some kind of bias or an opinion statement, then you probably want it to be a direct quote instead of just general information you would find in an indirect quote. So an indirect quote, you're looking at summarizing long pieces of information. It often provides context for the direct quotes you will include. So in general, your direct quotes are probably going to be more emotional, or probably if you're interviewing an expert, you want to have their expert opinion and their specific information related to your topic in the form of a direct quote. Unless it's something that's kind of long and complicated, you might paraphrase some of it and then include a direct quote for the more important parts of the information. Now, partial quotes are whenever you mix small bits of direct and indirect information. You want to use that sparingly and focus more on probably a paraphrase quote pairing. And that is what we just talked about, where you're using that direct quote in combination with additional information they provided outside of that direct quote to give a little more context. But one thing you want to do is use that paraphrased information as more of a transition. You don't want to repeat the same language over and over. So if they say the word great, maybe, or if they call something by the same name multiple times, then whenever you're paraphrasing some information, you may want to use an alternative, like a different word or something. You also want to avoid excessive quote alterations or overquoting someone. This happens a lot whenever you have one person who's very articulate and the other person maybe isn't, but you need all sides of an issue. So try not to quote one person more than another whenever you're looking at something that has multiple sides, like if they're discussing different parts of an issue. Whenever you're attributing information, you can say said or stated. Said is generally preferred. It sounds really boring, I'm sure, but it's the best way to say a person said something than to say they stated. Stated makes you sound more like you're a court stenographer. Testified, of course, is definitely used in conjunction with legal proceedings. Announced is usually an official proclamation. So if you were part of a news meeting or if you heard a speech by a political leader or the leader of a company, then you would say they announced something. You see this a lot when a company launches a new product. They'll say they announced they're releasing whatever today. You're also looking at using the word asked. If someone asks a question, then you want to say asked. You don't need to use any kind of fanciful wordplay. This isn't creative writing. We want to get to the point of information. And according to can often indicate a lack of belief on the part of the writer. So if you say, according to whatever source, this is how we feel, this is how the government feels about building a new nuclear power plant, or whatever issue you're discussing. Instead, you want to say probably the person's title and name, and then say how, if you still need to, how they have an important opinion about this topic. Like if they are a scientist, that they conducted research on the effects of nuclear power plants. That would be a way to introduce someone without showing any kind of positive or a negative connotation. Now, when you are quoting adults, of course, you want to mention them by their first and last name and include their title. After the first mention, most of the time you will use their last name only. With children, you want to mention their first and last name. After that, it's just the first name. Whenever someone is part of a domestic abuse issue, or if they are the survivor of some other kind of abuse or something, then you don't want to name that person. The only person you might mention or probably would mention would be the abuser. However, there are certain cases where you have to leave out certain details in order to not accidentally identify the person who was allegedly abused. And another case where you would not mention a person's name is for most infractions or arrests of minors. In general, you should not mention their name. The only time I've ever reported or seen someone report a case where a minor was involved and they actually mentioned them by name, it was usually in a murder trial or an attempted murder. Now, when you are providing titles for people, there are different ways to mention them. If you are mentioning the person's name with the title, for example, Pope Francis or Vice Presidents Nakamura and Smith, then you want to capitalize the title as well as those names. However, if you are mentioning the title without the name, in the example, the Pope gave his blessing, then it's lowercase. And you can abbreviate certain titles: doctor, governor, representative, senator. Those are all abbreviated under AP style. Now let's look at the expanded inverted pyramid. Whenever you start the expanded inverted pyramid, you of course want to start with your lead. It is probably going to be the first couple of paragraphs in your story. And remember, these paragraphs are going to be 1 to 3 sentences at most. So short bits of important information. You're going to continue the story using the bridge, and often that will include either paraphrased or direct quotes from an individual related to the story, probably directly related in some way to whatever you mentioned in your lead. And then you would answer any additional W's or H that were not addressed in your lead. The middle part continues the development. You're looking at including more facts, more direct quotes. This is where you can work in your second and third sources and expand upon the information you already provided at the beginning, and probably illustrate a few points a little better for your audience. At the end, you want to close with either some kind of call to action or maybe an encapsulating quote. You might look at what's happening next in the story if there is a next coming up. So think about those things. You're looking to kind of tie everything back to your original lead and to the other information your audience may want to know. And after you finish writing your first draft, you want to review, revise, and rewrite. So go back, use your spell check, use your word processor to figure out what needs to be fixed. See if maybe some of your points don't make sense in their current order. Maybe you need to elaborate a little more on one part, or you need to move a couple of things around. Don't be afraid to save a couple of different versions of it and see if maybe you need to change where some pieces of information begin in your story. Now, whenever we're looking at revising, you want to, first of all, address larger writing elements. So check your focus, make sure that everything is tying into your lead. If your lead seems like it's off base, then rewrite it. You also want to make sure that your organization is logical, that it's easy to understand who's speaking or where you're getting certain bits of information. You also want to have a reasonable paragraph breakdown. So make sure that your information is separated in a certain way so it's easy for your audience to understand. And of course, you want to make sure that all of your content is correct. And of course, you want to say, review your overall strategy to reach your target audience. So when you're reviewing, you want to ask yourselves these questions. Does it provide balanced information for my readers? Are they getting all the sides they need from the story, all the information that I can reasonably provide them? Is there a clear focus? Review your lead. See if maybe there's a point you need to develop a little further within this article. Are there any ideas that are off topic? Is there something that you can cut from this that maybe will help it make more sense? So it isn't always about adding. Sometimes you actually need to take something out for an article to make a little more sense. Do any of the paragraphs need to be deleted or otherwise altered? Maybe you need to move something around, shorten it a little bit, or is there enough supporting material? Do you have enough interviews and other sources so you sound like you understand the topic and that you think your audience will understand what you're saying? And of course, you want to review those grammatical revisions. And remember, while your word processor is not going to find every fault, it is a good place to start. I did notice that some of you had some issues that would have been caught right away by a spell checker or other type of review device. But read through everything, make sure that all of your sentences have a subject and a verb, and not only that they exist, but that they agree as well. Look for run-on sentences, sentence fragments. That's usually related to missing punctuation, like commas and semicolons or periods. See if there are any spelling errors or maybe missing words like a, an, or the, or if you are missing maybe a conjunction like or nor, or but. So check all those things. And this is part of why you want to read everything 2 or 3 times, see if there's something missing, and then you are able to edit it and make it a little better before you turn it in. And that's it. If you do all those things, you should be ready to go to the presses.